In this video segment, we're going to kind of go through the VSA backup process, but specific to application protection. This diagram we have here is similar to the diagram we used in a previous video segment, but now we're going to inject application into all of this. So same principle, we communicate, locate to virtual machines, do to VSS, do to a software snapshot, and do to backups. This example, this diagram here is basically whether or not you're doing streaming backups or IntelliSnap. We'll cover off both, but it really has to do more with the transactions, but also the application that we're protecting. So let's get into some details about that. A couple of years ago, I had an interesting conversation with a partner who was saying that he has a customer that has a bunch of SQL servers, virtualized SQLs, and he just uses VSA. And they always back up and they always restore, no problem. And I told him, I said, yeah, well, it's a 98% chance they're always going to work. And he's like, really? I'm like, yeah, there's a 70% chance they're always going to work. And I kept changing the percentage because in a way they were probably getting lucky. I'll explain why they were always working. But that one time that they don't work is probably that one time that the machine crashes and you need to restore it. So yeah, it might work under most circumstances, but that does not mean you don't have to worry about additional protection methods. So when VSS engage on a virtual machine, it does a software quiesce of the disks. But any VSS-aware application, in this case SQL, it'll also attempt to quiesce. So we have SQL, Exchange on Windows, Oracle on Windows. They're all VSS-aware applications. So the reason in this case that these SQL servers were quiescing no problem is because they weren't highly transactional, or at least when the backups were running, they weren't highly transactional at the time. So if VSS gets that quiet time, it's going to successfully engage. But if it does not get that quiet time, it's going to be a crash-consistent application backup. So in this customer's case, it was working for them probably because they were low transaction VMs. And if they take that knowledge and say, oh, well, we can do it for everything. Wow, Commvault's VSA is amazing. It's not going to work. They think in their little test environment or whatever machines they were looking at, hey, if it works on these, it's going to work on all of them. That's not the case. That's also why we have other options that we can do as well. And one of the big options is the application-aware backup. And this is what we call it. It injects a plugin inside the virtual machine. And when this came out, everyone's like, wow, this is the greatest thing. We don't have to deploy agents and all that stuff. Keep in mind that in previous segments in the virtualization videos, that we were talking about the idea of those software snapshots and the redo logs piling up. That is still the same, whether or not you're using VSS aware or not. So VSS aware, application aware, whatever you're using, what you're doing is you're quiescing the application and doing a software snapshot. Here's the difference. If you're doing the VSS aware, we're using VM tools to go in and tell the virtual machine engage VSS. If we're using app aware or application aware, Commvault's version of that, the only difference here is, well, there's some under the hood differences as well, but we are telling VSS to engage, which means we can sit there and wait and report back to us that VSS was able to successfully engage that application and quiesce it. But once a software snapshot occurs, transactions are transactions. So if it's a high I/O VM, you're still going to run into those problems with the software snapshots. Now, if we use our knowledge about IntelliSnap, use an app-aware software snapshot, then hardware snapshot, release the software snapshots, now you're looking at a really good option. So what do we do with those high transaction VMs? So now we're saying VSS is not the right option. App-awares might not even be the right option for high transactional VMs, unless maybe you're using IntelliSnap. Well, agents and guests are still a great option. And it's a great option for a couple of different reasons. Let's take Exchange, for example. With Exchange, I might also be doing mailbox backups. I could be doing archiving, right? But if I'm doing database backups even, I could be multi-streaming the database. Now, you can multi-stream a virtual machine, but it's only one stream per disk. So in this particular case, I could be doing one stream per database within the Exchange environment. So you can actually get pretty quick backups doing it that way. Take a SQL database. Now, application aware will do automatic log backups, and you could go ahead and configure that. By default, it's automatic, but you could switch it to a time interval. If you have a 15-minute RPO on your database, you put the agent in the guest, and you could be doing database backups multi-streaming, and you could also be doing your transaction log backups every 15 minutes. So the application aware is a great option for those maybe small to medium transactional, primarily SQL servers, but maybe if you have a standalone Exchange server, Oracle on Windows, which not too many people use, but it is out there, the application aware serves a really good purpose there. But if you have a high transactional application running on a virtual machine, the agents and guests for a lot of these things are still the best way to go. So when you put all of these different options together, what you have to realize is you got all these virtual machines out in your environment. They're not all created equal. So most of them, the VSA backup's just going to take care of them. And that's including those low transaction SQL machines, because VSS will engage no problem. But you always have the option putting agents and guests, and you always have the option of doing application aware. The biggest advantage of application aware is not about the backups, it's about the restores. You see, when you have these applications, if you're just doing VSS, or if you're just doing database dumps, which we're going to cover that in the next segment in this video series, if you need to restore that virtual machine, and the database doesn't come online in a consistent state, unless the Commvault administrator understands the application, there's nothing he could do. What they're going to have to do is they're going to have to get the application owner involved to get that application up online. The application aware, since we're putting that plugin inside the virtual machine itself, you can actually do a restore of that data using the agent. So if the Commvault administrator is used to doing SQL restores, that's exactly what they're going to use when they're going to restore the database. So the application aware, big advantage in the restore options, but don't forget, you're still going to run into those problems with the redo logs piling up for those high transaction applications. So you have multiple options. Consider which ones are best for you.